Look at that. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dave Costa, the Renegade Aviator, and we've got a really great show for you today. You can see that beautiful airplane there, the A-37 Dragonfly, flown by Mark Peterson, and I'm going to bring Mark on in just a second. But before I do that, I'll say this every week. First of all, let's say that we all miss Maya. So Maya's normally here with me, but she's in school right now, I believe, or she has something else going on, and school takes precedence over this kind of stuff. So Maya will be back. Unfortunately, today you just got to look at my face hiding behind the Moses Lake picture there. I think it looks better this way. What do you think? That's my twin over there in the background. Anyway, MosesLakeAirshow.com, MosesLakeAirshow.com, MosesLakeAirshow.com. Go there and get your tickets, because your dad wants you to take him to the Moses Lake Air Show. It's Father's Day weekend, 15 and 16 June. The Moses Lake Air Show, we've got a lineup. Let me just give you the lineup right now before we launch into the show. It won't take long, because you guys have asked for jets. You've asked for military aircraft, and that's what we have for you. We've got the U.S. Air Force A-10 Thunderbolt, the U.S. Marine Corps MV-22 Osprey, the Air Force C-17 Globemaster. We've got the U.S. Air Force Wings of Blue parachute team from the U.S. Air Force Academy. We got Brad Worston, Power Edition air shows. We've got the Renegade Aviator and the TS-11 Iskra. If you see that guy lurking around, let me know. John Melby and Fear Boss. He's got a biplane. You really don't want to miss that. Mark Peterson, who's coming up here shortly, in the A-37 Dragonfly. And if you think that's a T-37 tweet, you got something to learn today. We've got my buddy Tom Larkin as well, mini jet air shows. A Yuchi Tagachi, you have Red Fox air shows, and a KC-135 was just announced. That's the big Air Force air refueling platform. Donna Flynn's our air boss. We'll all be flying under her direction. And without further ado, I want to introduce my friend, Mark Peterson, somebody that I've known for a while. Mark, welcome to the Moses Lake Air Show live.
Hey, David, great to be here.
Great to have you, Mark. You know, Mark, you've struck me from day one when I met you. You're a civilian trained pilot, but I flew with you in the Alpha jet, and I was absolutely blown away at your level of professionalism, how you ran that jet. I mean, I really thought you were a fighter pilot. I mean, you professional, safe, accurate in everything you do. You run it like a machine. You fly a P-51 Mustang at air shows. You fly the Alpha jet. And at Moses Lake, you're going to be flying that beautiful A-37 Dragonfly, which is something I learned a lot about when I saw it in pieces in your hangar. So tell us a little bit, Mark, about what everybody asks. Is that a T-37 or an A-37, and what that difference is?
Yeah, it's definitely not a T-37. The whole program started back in the 60s. The Air Force and Army were looking for a close air support aircraft, and they were trying to come up with a low-cost, lightweight alternative. Cessna made a proposal to use the T-37 as a starting point, and they, through several iterations, they finally ended up with the A-37B. And to give you an idea how far they went, I believe there's less than 20% common parts between the T-37 and the A-37. And the best illustration, of course, are the weights and engines. So the T-37, I believe, had a max takeoff weight of 6,000 pounds. This thing has a max takeoff weight of 14,000 pounds. The engines on the T were J69s, I believe. They produced 1,069 pounds of thrust. These are the J85-17As, which produced 2,850 pounds per thrust per side. So it's an amazingly different airplane. Most of the guys that I've taken for rides in it that have a lot of time in the T-37, like Air Force vets, they say this is the airplane that they all wanted the T-37 to be when they were in pilot training, because it has the thrust to just do amazing things. So fun little airplane, but it was essentially the precursor to the A-10 Warthog. A lot of the design ideas, a lot of the initial tactics were developed, on this airplane, and then of course carried forward into the A-10 design. one thing you got to remember, this thing was put into combat in 68. And I think the A-10's first flight was in 72. So again, a lot of the learnings out of Vietnam were really pioneered on this airframe and then put into practice in the A-10. Very, very
Look,
different gun, obviously.
look at the hard points. You got what, 3 or 4 hard points aside there? Is that correct?
Four side, yeah. When you load this thing up, it's a beastie looking little machine. We had it at Reno for the the annual judging on restorations, and we had stuff on all 4 pylons, and it looked really it looked really nasty with all that stuff hanging on it.
Well, you know, and then anybody who had gone through Air Force flight training back in the 60s or back in those days, they would have seen that A-37 tweet. So this will be familiar to a lot of the military people that are there. And this, you know, being a combat version, being a beefed up version, being a performer, you kind of hinted to it. But from what I've learned from you in the past, there's quite a bit of performance packed in this thing, even on one engine.
Oh yeah, it's a funny airplane because there are single engine cross country cruise tables for it, so you can fly the thing around on one motor all day long if you want. And actually, that was actually a tactic in order to get the airplane to loiter for long periods of time in the battlefield combat area. They would actually shut one down, and they would fly on one for 30 minutes, and then they'd swap them out and switch to the other motor. But that dropped their fuel flows obviously significantly, and this thing burns a lot of gas. So if you put 4 drops on it, so 2 each side, the thing can take off with 847 gallons of gas on board. And so when you can shut one down and loiter at maybe 90 gallons an hour, you can sit up there for a long time. And that's exactly what they were looking for in terms of air-to-ground support, was the ability to loiter over the battlefield for a long period of time and wait for a call from the ground for assistance. So fun airplane though. You put it in an air show environment, this thing's empty weight is just over 5,300 pounds. We got 5,700 pounds of thrust, and you put a little bit of fuel on board for an air show performance. And I add power, release brakes, go to max takeoff thrust, and normally rotating it off the ground in less than 7 seconds, and maybe 700-800 feet. And I can rotate very quickly up to a 20-degree nose up angle and accelerate from 100 knots off the ground to 200 knots in the climb, and then pull to the vertical out of that. And so the thing nearly goes straight up. It's just an amazing little airplane to fly.
And that's, ladies and gentlemen, if you're hearing this, you got to get out to the Moses Lake Air Show and watch this airplane fly. Videos are great, and we're the YouTube generation, but watching it on video doesn't hold a candle to hearing this thing and watching this thing live. It's loud. You got 2 J85s. It puts out some noise. And what does that straight wing give you, Mark, from the air show perspective? Give us a little bit of coaching here of what you can do with this airplane that a lot of jets may not do real well at.
Well, the biggest thing, of course, is just very, very small turn radius, and I can keep the airplane very, very close to the crowd. So the whole show is done right in front in show center, and it just doesn't take a lot of work. I only pull 4 Gs in the show, and yet I barely go beyond the end of the runway. And so it's just incredible to generate that much thrust and yet have that slow Hershey bar wing to use to maneuver. I can fly a show that's actually tighter than the Mustang, and yet do it at jet performance speeds and noise and climb and et cetera, et cetera. Those smoke trails also just do a great job of showing everybody exactly the maneuvers I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And also blows some neat smoke rings like you see there that occasionally, if things line up right, I get to fly right through the center of those, and that's always fun.
That's cool. Are they like Sanders smoke generators on the wings?
That's exactly what they are. Yep.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So yeah, fuel burn on that thing, you're probably up to close to, 500 gallons an hour if you wanted to keep the power up, maybe a little bit more.
Oh, a little bit more. Yeah. Takeoff thrust. It's over 500 gallons an hour. It's really going through the gas.
That's amazing. Well, we had mentioned that this was a Vietnam era aircraft, and Vietnam is that forgotten period. A lot of our World War II vets are passing along, right? That generation's going by. The Korean War vets are getting old, and now I go to air shows, and the Vietnam vets are getting old, so we need to really remember what those men and women did for us in Vietnam, and the people that flew this aircraft, not just U.S. pilots, but even the South Vietnamese pilots that flew this. But that was, in the modern day battlefield, Vietnam was a different time and a different war. And I think it's a great salute you give to those Vietnam vets that really deserve our appreciation.
Well, I totally agree, David. I mean, this airplane being part of the Vietnam conflict, it was a shame that a lot of the guys that I meet connected to this airplane and that war. Really, I think, I don't think as a country we've ever been terribly good at honoring our veterans and treating them the way they deserve. But obviously, the Vietnam War was one of the worst. And when guys came home and got spit on at the airport and got called baby killers and all that stuff, that was pretty tragic, considering they were laying their lives on the line, often not through their choice, but through the draft. It's just awful as a country to have that history. So the opportunity that I have and you have occasionally to do something special for those guys and to let others understand and appreciate the sacrifices that they made and the comrades that they lost through that process is something I really enjoy doing, because I think that we should all do a better job of helping those guys. So I mentioned earlier, we're hoping to get both my A-37 and this A-37, the one you saw in the video, that's Charlie Largay's airplane, to Oshkosh this year for the Warbird and Review program. And we're going to have hope to have Hank Hoffman there, who's a retired colonel in the Air Force who flew A-37s in Vietnam. And we're going to give him an opportunity to talk to the crowds there about his experiences flying the airplane and what it was like to put that thing really into combat. And A-37 was an interesting airplane because it flew far more sorties per airframe per hour or per day. That thing just worked and worked and worked. And if you look at all the numbers that they traditionally tracked in terms of, hours of operation per maintenance hour, et cetera, or maintenance hour per ops hour, however you want to look at it. This airplane just blew other airplanes away. Charlie told me a great story one day. He said he heard of a time in Vietnam where they're trying to do a maximum effort. And so they had everybody, staged and ready to go to put out maximum effort for every airframe. And the A-37s, jumped on it and flew into combat and were just pounding the enemy. And then they had to stand down, and command called him and said, what's going on? He said, well, we've run out of ammo. And the command said, what? How could you possibly run out of ammo? They said, well, you gave us enough to fly for a few days and that's it. We've already gone through it all. And the command could not believe that this airplane was delivering that much ammunition to the battlefield. They were flying it sometimes, they were flying us, I think, 18, 20 hours out of 24-hour periods. Then they were just changing pilots and refueling, put a little oil in the motors, rearm it, and off it would go. So
down low.
From a lot down low. They flew from before sunrise to well after sunset. They often carried flares so they could illuminate the battlefield to find targets. It was just an amazing little aircraft. Very, very versatile.
And and today, in today's modern warfare, not to compare aviators today from years past, but there's a big difference in a push button war and a standoff distance with missiles than really literally be able to see the ground troops on the ground coming over the top of the trees. And as a former jarhead myself, there's nothing better than seeing air support come over your head at treetop level when you can see the whites of the eyes of the pilot. So, it took a lot of guts. I had one of my buddies who was a Vietnam pilot, and he said, almost anybody can do one mission. It's climbing into the jet or into the aircraft the next day and the next day and the next day. And that's why, hats off to these people, because different kind of flying than 30,000 feet. Not that that's easy, right? It's never easy, but they deserve our support. So when you see that Vietnam vet at an air show, walk up to them and say thank you. They won't bite.
Absolutely. No, a great bunch of great guys, bunch of great guys. One of the things that I love about this airplane that I can show in the air show that you highlighted is that Hershey bar wing, that small turn radius and whatnot. One of the advantages the A-37 had in combat is because of its lower speeds and tight turn radiuses, it could operate at much lower altitudes than the high-speed jets that were trying to do similar missions. And as a result, because as you know, in Vietnam in those days, there was often low overcast. And so the high-speed aircraft were often very, very limited because they just simply couldn't get enough clear air to get a good bombing profile working, to get the right dive angles, et cetera. And this airplane could operate at much lower altitudes, and as a result, was substantially more accurate than a lot of the other airframes that were trying to, drop weapons of any kind, whether it was napalm or explosives or et cetera. And so one of its advantages and its performance capabilities was just ultra accurate bombing. And it also ran very, very steep dive angles. So I can't remember what the top dive angle was, but it was nearly vertical. And so they could drop bombs in a very, very small circle.
That's, when you got this aircraft, Mark, what was the process? I mean, you to get something like this flying again. There's not many A-37s out there. As you mentioned, there's yours and maybe one other that I know of is Charlie's. But they're not like the L-39s you see all over the place, or even MiGs, which seem to be all over the place. But what's different about this aircraft from a maintenance standpoint, or just putting it back into the air again as a U.S. military jet?
It's it's all the standard challenge of a former military aircraft. Parts availability is difficult. The tech manuals are all very, very good. So we've been very lucky to find all the manuals we need, and they continue to operate the airplane and update the tech manuals all the way through its use at Edwards Test Pilot School. So they kind of, that part of it's really good. The challenge is, with tech manuals is there's the manual, and then there's all the stuff you need to know behind the manual that you only get through training and experience. And that finding guys and working our way through that problem has always been a challenge. But the parts are the biggest challenge because, again, there's a surprisingly large number of T-37 parts out there, but they don't fit on an A-37. And so, we're kind of scrounging the world for parts. And unfortunately, there's still a couple of countries down in Central America that are still flying the A-37 a little bit as an anti-drug aircraft. Mm-hmm. And so they're scrounging the world for parts as well. So we're obviously occasionally butting heads with them, trying to get those parts. And sometimes the prices get to be really stupid. So
yeah. Well, the Alpha Jet does as well. So you have very, very fun sets of toys. I love going to your hangar and seeing all those aircraft. But you made a mention once to me that it really, you don't really ever own a warbird. You've got a couple of them. So maybe talk a little bit about that. What does that mean? Everybody hears that and they go, what do you mean about that statement?
Yeah, a friend of mine taught me that many years ago when I got into the warbird scene, and it's by no means my unique thought. I mean, I think many warbird operators feel exactly the same way, particularly with like the P-51 Mustang. I mean, that's such an iconic aircraft that I and most owners consider that to be really a national treasure. It belongs to the public. We're just the custodians. We just happen to be lucky enough to be taking care of one. And one of the things that comes along with that is the responsibility of getting the airplane out in front of the public through either air shows or other events. I try to use mine for, every veterans memorial, fly day, funeral service, Memorial Day, whatever I can. Try to get it out so that people can see it and hear it. And it's something that I think almost every owner takes very, very seriously. It's not their bird. It's not their toy. It's something that we have to be very careful with. Another friend, he had a great way of putting it. He said, Mark, think of it this way. Think of climbing in the Washington Monument and flying it around. He said, that's the way you got to think of a P-51 Mustang. And so I think that's the way I do, whether it's an A-37 or an Alpha Jet or a P-51 Mustang. I just think they're all just such wonderful treasures, and to see them fly instead of just sitting on a stand in a museum, I think is important. I know a lot of people would rather just see all these things parked somewhere, and I happen to disagree. I think they should be seen flying because that's what they are. They're flying machines.
Yeah, and there it just gives you a different perspective of the way the world was. It's a chance to go and learn history all over again, right? I mean,
Yeah.
talking to people
Yeah.
like yourselves or people that have flown them. We had talked a little bit about STEM before as well. People come out to air shows, and we talk about STEM a lot, but you and me, we don't make a living doing air show stuff. We have other careers, right? We have
Right.
other jobs. And, you're mentioning how important STEM is. And it's a great way to show a kid an aircraft, show that next generation something cool, and say, it's not big ego, tough guys flying these things. It's people that work really hard, did really good at something, studied
Yep.
hard in school, built a business, right?
Yep.
You know, so I know you're in a STEM field.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's
Well,
any
science.
words of advice to the young kids today?
Absolutely. Science is so important. I mean, if you look at all the things that have changed our world, not only our country, but the world, the vast majority of them, I shouldn't say all, but the vast majority of them are based in science in some way, whether you look at medicine or high tech or aviation or communications or et cetera. I mean, they all have a huge science and math component. And I think aviation, as you pointed out, is just one of those things that, when you get that standard question, what do I need to know math for, by some smart ass 13-year-old, you just point at an airplane and go, that, you know, um, I was talking with an air show guy one time, and we were talking about how important it is to understand turn radiuses and physics and performance, and whatnot, so we don't kill ourselves when we're trying to fly air shows. And we were talking about the art of an air show versus the science of an air show. And I said, I totally agree with you. I said, I think the art of an air show is critical to do something artistic and beautiful and exciting for people to see. But I said, it's Sir Isaac Newton in physics that'll kill you if you don't understand what turn radius of a loop or a min radius turn. So, art and science go well together in aviation.
Yeah.
They belong together in many, many fields. But if you don't have that science background, to me, you just don't really understand all the things that are critical to doing something safely and, as you pointed out, professionally. So,
Yeah,
science is huge.
yeah, and you mentioned turn radiuses, things like that. When you're flying the air show, those are things that can be calculated, and they
Mhm.
are calculated. You just don't go
Mhm.
up there and say, "Well, I can keep this jet in front of the crowd," and so people go, well, "That's great." You just do X, Y, or Z. But I don't think people realize that you, as an air show pilot, you actually determine those numbers. You determine that radius for what airspeed, or you determine. It's science with the art. But I think when young pilots that are out on an air show, you just don't climb into your 172 and put on an impromptu air show.
No.
You did a lot of studying on the aircraft and the environment before you ever did any of this stuff.
Absolutely. And I've condensed all that down to a simple Excel spreadsheet that I run for every air show that I do anywhere in the country. And I enter the performance characteristics of the airplane, the density, altitude, and and what routine I'm going to fly. And that Excel spreadsheet calculates all of my safety gates, my key altitudes, everything for my performance. And I put a copy of that on my knee board, and I hand a copy of that to my crew chief. And that's how we run the routine. So there's to run an air show without science is a good way to get yourself killed.
That's excellent. I'm humbled because I don't have a spreadsheet like that. I'm writing a note down.
That's the nerd in me again coming out.
I'm going, I got work to do again. But Mark, with the A37, maybe give us what's something really different, maybe something nobody would really know about the A37 that you either learned or found out flying them. You had mentioned to me one day rate of climb 2-engine, which was astronomical, and then you gave me the single engine rate of climb, and that was astronomical.
Yeah, this thing. So the book says that from a sea level takeoff standard day slick, no external stores on it, it'll go from sea level to its maximum ceiling of 25,000 feet in about 2.5 minutes. So it's about 10,000 feet a minute average. So when you come off the ground at sea level with a fairly, with just normal fuel load and that configuration, it's 12, 13, 14,000 feet a minute initial rate of climb. So that's fun. But as you pointed out, the really crazy part is you can do a single engine go around fully configured and still climb at over 2,000 feet a minute. So, so it's, yeah. When we were doing some training on the airplane early on, we were going through the checklist and whatnot. And, the single engine go says, operating engine throttle maximum. And we scratched that out and wrote as required, because you really don't need max throttle in the, or max power in the airplane, because it's got enough.
Well, and that's why your airplane at air shows, it's bringing unique airplanes out. And again, everything at an air show is part carnival. But here's the thing, right? Everybody loves to see the current military iron show up. We all do. I mean,
sure.
I'm a kid too. I love to see that new stuff. But it's having different you would never normally see anywhere. And that's the reason when we tell people, well, why go to this air show or why go to that air show? Well, you're going to see planes like the A-37 fly, which you're not going to see anywhere else. You're not going to see this at your local airport. And, as you mentioned, Mark, you're caretaking this thing. There's not going to be any more of them built. So, it is that unique thing to not buy your dad a tie for Father's Day. Is to show up at the Moses Lake Air Show on June 15th and 16th and watch Mark fly. I mean, it'll be an outstanding performance. I promise you. He promises you. It's just, it's unique. I love unique stuff because we have a lot of the same anymore. And remember back in the old days of the military, there were so many different makes and models of aircraft. We've all standardized today, right? The Marines fly the F-35. So does the Air Force. So does the Navy. Nothing wrong with that. But that's a glass cockpit. How many computers help you fly that air show right now, Mark?
This one, just the gray matter between my ears. That's the only computer working in that airplane.
The best ones going. Yeah, that's it. All flown by hand. Very, very cool.
When I flew at Moses Lake 2 years ago in this aircraft, that was the first time that an A-37 had been seen on the air show circuit in North America for more than 20 years. So, if you're looking for unique, you're not going to see many of these at an air show anywhere, anytime. So hopefully there's a couple more in restoration that we'll see some flying in the coming years. But I don't know. They're not the easiest airplanes to get up and going, and they're not the easiest ones to keep flying. But hopefully we'll see a few more out there buzzing around, because the crowds love them. Between the noise, the size of the show, and the performance capabilities. It's flying into Boise last year, I had a blast because people were just in awe. Because I have to tell you, so we were setting up for the air show, and in practice day, they had a F-15 Eagle come in, and he took off, did a low transition to a vertical climb at the end of the runway. And we have a 10,000-foot runway here at Boise. And we watched that happen. And I looked at my crew chief and my coach, and I went, we can do that. And so, so we changed the takeoff routine and went through and briefed it all and looked at the numbers, whatnot. I did the same thing. And a brake release at one end, at the other end, 10,000 feet later, I was doing 280 knots. I pulled to the vertical, went straight up 7,000 feet. In that airplane. And a lot of people said, I think you outclimbed the F-15. Obviously I didn't, but it sure looked good.
Wow. And you got two engines. I love two engines on anything. So I love two engine safety. It's nice to, on my little Iskra, the most dangerous part is to take off, right? Let's hope the engine keeps running, but it's nice to have two of everything. How is that side-by-side seating? A lot of people will ask that, right? I mean, for those of us that fly all the time, but is there a difference in how you fly your show because of that side-by-side seating?
Definitely. There's a bunch of different things. One of the biggest things I notice is my head's not on the center line of the airplane. And so aileron rolls in particular just feel a little bit different. It's nothing like the Yak 110 that the guys fly, where they're sitting 5 or 10 feet away from the center line. I'm only 18 inches maybe from the center line, but you do notice it. When I first started doing aileron rolls in the airplane, I just noticed sort of an unusual feeling compared to the Alpha or the Mustang. And sure enough, we started tracking it down, and it was just that offset from the center line. The other issue you run into is you don't have equal vision out each side. And so when you're doing maneuvers that are important to reference the ground, you don't have a consistent sort of glare shield look. You don't have a reference uh, level with the glare shield that allows you to line it up well with the horizon, for instance, in an inverted pass, or when you're doing a 4-point roll. So it's a little bit different in that regard. It's just you're not sitting on the center line of the airplane. And then, of course, in formation operations, it's really different because now you're doing cross cockpit rejoins. And those can get to be very dangerous because you just can't see over that far canopy rail. And even though it's got a relatively low rail, you definitely notice a difference between rejoins on one side or the other.
Interesting. Outstanding. Well, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, like we said, or maybe I didn't say it, maybe I said it in the pre-show, tickets are on sale for Moses Lake Live or Moses Lake Air Show. So you need to buy them now because the price will only go higher. And I sound like a used car salesman now, but what could Mark and I do today to put you in a VIP seat at the Moses Lake Air Show? Go to MosesLakeAirshow.com and go click on tickets and get them now because they're going to sell out. I think we sold out the VIP last year. I'm not sure, but I'm going to say we sold the VIP out because it sounds great that way. Jordan, am I lying to the audience?
You are on point. We definitely sold out of some of our premium seating areas, and wanted to go ahead and highlight how great it is to be sitting along the flight line for the VIP experience, for seeing Mark Peterson in general, or specifically with his A37. We got a perfect video representation, as you noted, David. Not the same at all as seeing it in person, but you can get a little taste of what you will be seeing in person from the flight line as Mark comes right by.
I'm getting a lot of messages off of my social media. People saying, Mark, that they've seen you fly and loved your show. So I've got three or four messages on that. I just talked over the noise.
That's okay. I was just a photo pass at the show. Yeah. Yeah, photo passes on the incoming side are exciting, but obviously at Show Center they're even a better view. So it's I highly recommend folks.
And that was from the Moses Lake Air Show, just to make sure everybody knows. That was at the Moses Lake Air Show a couple years ago, and Mark crushed it. So I'll let you guys wrap up. Thank you for the pushes.
Right on. Well, Mark, again, as I said, as somebody that puts their heart and soul and puts their money where their mouth is with these airplanes, thank you, because you keep several of these aircraft available at air shows. I've learned a lot from you. I've enjoyed always taking the time to talk to you. I always learn something every time I talk to you. And I can't thank you enough for joining me here on Moses Lake Live. I'm looking forward to seeing you out there. And it's June 15th through the 16th. It's usually beautiful weather, so come on out, right? And any closing words, Mark?
Well, the Moses Lake Air Show is just a blast. I mean, it's a fantastic setting, historic airport. The facilities there are wonderful. Terry Quick and the guys, everybody there puts on a great show. Donna always runs a great show, so I'm sure it's going to be crisp and professional, and the performer lineup is just outstanding. So it's going to be, one of the best shows on the West Coast, probably for quite a while. So I'm looking forward to flying in it again, and flown it before in the Alpha Jet and the A37, and any airplane I can get there to fly, love to do it.
Outstanding. Mark Peterson, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Mark. We're looking forward to seeing you out there on June 15th and 16th at Moses Lake Air Show.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure being here tonight.
Likewise, sir. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.